You know what keeps me awake at night? It's not the 30 years I spent wearing a badge. It's not the murders, the domestic violence calls, or even the child abuse cases that haunt most cops until retirement. No. It's the sounds I heard coming from that house on Maple Street, the sounds that no human throat should ever make. Welcome back to the Obscuralore Vault, where we uncover the stories that authorities don't want you to hear. I'm your host, and today's account comes from a police captain who contacted me after years of silence. He's agreed to share his experience investigating what became known as the Riverside Possession Case, the most documented supernatural incident in American law enforcement history. My name is Captain Michael Torres, though I'm retired now. Been retired for 3 years, but I still wake up in cold sweats thinking about the Henderson family. When dispatch first got the call on October 15, 2019, it seemed routine enough. Domestic disturbance at 1247 Maple Street. The caller, a neighbor, reported strange screaming and furniture being thrown around. I'd been captain of our precinct for 12 years by then. Thought I'd seen everything this job could throw at me. Drug raids, hostage situations, murder scenes that would make seasoned detectives vomit. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what I found in that house. Officer Martinez and I pulled up to the Henderson residence at 11:47 p.m. From the outside, it looked like any other suburban home. 2-story colonial, white picket fence, garden gnomes on the front lawn. The kind of place where families have barbecues and kids ride bikes in the driveway. But the silence. That should have been our first warning. Every house on that street was lit up except theirs. Not a single light in any window, but we could see shapes moving behind the curtains. Dark shapes that seemed to flow rather than walk. Martinez knocked on the front door. "Police! We received a noise complaint." The response wasn't words, it was laughter. High-pitched, childlike laughter that went on for nearly 30 seconds without taking a breath. Martinez and I exchanged glances. In all my years, I'd never heard a sound quite like that. The door opened by itself. The smell hit us first. Not death, I know that smell well enough. This was different, sweet and rotten at the same time, like flowers left in stagnant water for weeks. Martinez covered his nose with his sleeve, but I forced myself to breathe normally. You can't show weakness on calls like this. "Mr. Henderson? Mrs. Henderson? This is the police." Our flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing a living room that looked like it had been hit by a tornado. Furniture overturned, family photos scattered across the floor with all the faces scratched out. But it was the walls that made my stomach drop. Words carved deep into the drywall. Not written, carved. Deep gouges that would have taken incredible strength to make. Most were in languages I didn't recognize, but some were in English. "He sees through her eyes. The father lies sleeping. 6 days until the door opens." Martinez whispered, "Cap, look at this." He was shining his light on the staircase. Every single family photo hanging along the wall had been turned upside down except one. A picture of their youngest daughter, Sarah, age 7. Her photo remained right side up, but someone had drawn black circles around her eyes with what looked like charcoal. That's when we heard her laughing again, coming from directly above us. "Sarah, honey, this is the police. Are you okay up there?" The laughter stopped. For a moment, the house was completely silent. Then we heard footsteps. Not normal footsteps. These sounded backwards, like someone walking heel to toe across the floor above us. Martinez reached for his radio. "Dispatch, we're going to need backup at 1247 Maple Street. Possible child endangerment situation." The radio erupted in static. Through the noise, we could swear we heard that same childlike voice saying, "No one's coming to help you." We found David and Margaret Henderson in the master bedroom, huddled together in the corner like scared animals. They'd been there for 3 days, they told us later. 3 days without food or water, too terrified to leave that room. David's hands were shaking so badly he could barely speak. "She's not our daughter anymore," he kept repeating. "That thing upstairs, it's wearing Sarah's face, but it's not her. Margaret hadn't spoken in 2 days. She just sat there rocking back and forth, staring at the ceiling like she could see through it to whatever was happening in her daughter's room above. "Mr. Henderson, I need you to tell me exactly what's been happening here." David's story came out in fragments. It started 3 weeks earlier. Sarah began talking to an invisible friend she called Mr. Scratch. Normal enough, lots of kids have imaginary friends. But then Sarah started knowing things she shouldn't know. Private conversations between her parents. Details about their neighbors' personal lives. Things a 7-year-old couldn't possibly know. "She told me about my affair," David whispered, shame and terror mixing in his voice. Margaret didn't even know about it. How could Sarah know? The ceiling above us shuddered. Dust rained down from between the wooden beams. Whatever was happening up there was getting more violent. "She stopped eating 5 days ago," Margaret suddenly spoke, her voice hoarse from screaming. "She doesn't sleep. She just stares. And the things she says..." She broke down sobbing again. Martinez was getting antsy. "Cap, we need to get up there and check on the kid." I knew he was right, but something in my gut was telling me to wait. To call for specialized units, child psychologists, maybe even clergy. But what was I going to tell my superiors? That I needed a priest because a 7-year-old was scaring me? The decision was made for us. The hallway leading to Sarah's room felt longer than it should have. I counted 13 steps from the staircase to her door. But when we walked it, it felt like we were walking for minutes. The walls seemed to stretch, and the family photos lining the hallway appeared to be watching us, their eyes following our movement. Martinez reached for the doorknob first. It was ice cold despite the October heat that had the rest of the house feeling stuffy. "Sarah, we're coming in, okay? We just want to make sure you're safe." The room was completely empty. Not just empty of people, empty of everything. No furniture, no toys, no clothes. Just bare walls and a single window letting in pale moonlight. But the strangest part? The room smelled like winter, like snow and pine trees and that crisp air you only get during a blizzard. "Where the hell is she?" Martinez whispered. That's when we heard the voice. Not from the room we were standing in, but from behind us. From the hallway we'd just walked down. "You're standing in my house now." We spun around to find Sarah standing at the top of the stairs, but this wasn't the little girl from the family photos. Her skin was pale as paper, her hair hanging in greasy tangles around her face. Her eyes, God, her eyes were completely black, not just the pupils. The entire eye, from corner to corner, was the color of midnight. She was floating 3 inches off the ground. "Sarah, honey, we're here to help you. Can you come down here and talk to us?" Her head tilted to the side at an impossible angle. When she smiled, her teeth were all wrong, too sharp, too many of them. "Sarah's not here anymore, but you can visit her if you want. She's downstairs in the basement having tea with Mr. Scratch." Martinez grabbed my arm. "Cap, there is no basement. I checked the house plans before we came up here." Sarah's smile grew wider. "There is now." I should have called for backup. Should have evacuated the family and cordoned off the house until we could figure out what we were dealing with. But something compelled us forward. Not curiosity. Compulsion. Like invisible hands pushing us toward whatever was waiting in that impossible basement. The stairs appeared behind the kitchen, where there had been a solid wall just minutes before. Wooden steps descending into absolute darkness, with the sound of dripping water echoing from below. "This is insane," Martinez muttered. But he followed me down anyway. The basement was enormous, easily 3 times the size of the house above it, with stone walls that looked ancient, medieval, the kind of stonework you'd find in European castles, not suburban American homes. Candles lined the walls, providing flickering light that created dancing shadows. In the center of the room sat a small table set for tea, with 2 chairs. One normal-sized, one built for a child. Sarah sat in the smaller chair, but she looked different now. Younger somehow, more fragile, more like the little girl from the family photos. "Officers," she said in a perfectly normal 7-year-old voice. "Would you like some tea? Mr. Scratch made it special." Across from her sat something that made my blood freeze. It wore the shape of a man, but everything about it was wrong. Too tall, too thin, with fingers that were twice as long as they should be. Its face was constantly shifting, like it couldn't decide what features to wear. "Please," Sarah said, gesturing to 2 more chairs that definitely hadn't been there a moment before. "Sit with us. Mr. Scratch has been so excited to meet you." The thing that called itself Mr. Scratch turned toward us. When it spoke, its voice sounded like grinding stone. "Captain Torres, Officer Martinez, welcome to my home." What happened next defies every rational explanation I've ever heard. We sat down at that tea table, not because we wanted to, but because refusing seemed impossible, like trying to refuse gravity or the sunrise. Mr. Scratch poured tea from a delicate china pot. The liquid that came out was black as oil and smelled like sulfur. "You're wondering what I am," it said, those 2 long fingers wrapped around its teacup. "Your species has so many names for us: demon, devil, fallen angel. But those are just words you use to make yourselves feel better about the things you don't understand." Sarah sipped her tea and smiled. "Mr. Scratch is teaching me about the spaces between spaces, the places where your maps have blank spots. I've been watching your family for generations, Captain Torres. Your great-grandmother knew me by a different name. She used to leave offerings on her windowsill every full moon." My blood turned to ice. My great-grandmother had been known for her eccentric religious practices, things my family never talked about, things we tried to forget. "How do you know about my family?" Mr. Scratch laughed, and the sound made the candle flames flicker. "Time isn't a line for creatures like me. It's more like a book, and I can flip through the pages whenever I choose. I know about your daughter's car accident next month. I know about the cancer growing in your wife's lung. I know about the choice you'll have to make." Martinez stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the stone floor. "This is insane. We're police officers, not whatever this is supposed to be." Mr. Scratch turned its attention to him, and Martinez froze mid-step. "Officer Martinez, tell me, how is your son doing in rehab? The 3rd time's the charm, they say." Martinez's face went white. His son's addiction wasn't common knowledge. Hell, Martinez had told me about it in confidence just last week. "You see," Mr. Scratch continued, "I collect information. It's what I do. I gather secrets like your people gather stamps, and Sarah here has been helping me add to my collection." What made the Henderson case so well documented wasn't our initial response. It was what happened over the following 6 weeks. Because despite every instinct telling me to run, to transfer the case to someone else, to pretend none of this had happened, I couldn't let it go. I started carrying a digital recorder, started taking photographs, started documenting everything, because I knew that someday someone would need proof. The audio recordings are the most disturbing evidence we collected. Sarah's voice shifting between that of a 7-year-old child and something ancient and malevolent. Sometimes mid-sentence, sometimes she'd be speaking in English and finish the thought in languages that linguistic experts couldn't identify. But it was the photographs that convinced the FBI to get involved. Picture after picture of Sarah in impossible positions, standing on the ceiling, appearing in multiple locations simultaneously. In one photograph taken by Martinez, Sarah appears to be having a conversation with empty air. But when we examined the negative, there were shadows, shapes that looked almost human, but wrong in ways that made your eyes hurt to look at them. The physical manifestations got worse as the weeks went on, furniture moving on its own, temperatures dropping 40 degrees in a matter of seconds, electronic equipment failing in ways that our tech experts couldn't explain. But the worst part was watching what it did to the Henderson family. David aged 20 years in 6 weeks. Margaret stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped responding to most stimuli. They became shells of themselves, hollowed out by terror and something else. something that was feeding on them. I reached out to experts, psychologists, parapsychologists, religious authorities, university researchers, anyone who might have insight into what we were dealing with. Most of them dismissed our evidence as elaborate hoaxes or mass hysteria, but Dr. Elizabeth Kane from the University of Chicago's psychology department agreed to observe Sarah in person. Dr. Kane lasted 4 hours in the Henderson house before she requested to be removed from the case. Her final report, which I still have a copy of, contains a single paragraph. The subject demonstrates capabilities that fall outside the parameters of known psychological or psychiatric conditions. The phenomena observed during my visit cannot be explained by current scientific understanding. I recommend immediate intervention by authorities better equipped to handle paranormal manifestations. Father Miguel Santos from St. Mary's Cathedral was more direct. After spending one night at the Henderson house, he packed his things and left town. Before he disappeared, he left a note on my desk. Some doors should never be opened. What's happening to that child isn't possession in the traditional sense. It's something far worse. It's invitation. That thing isn't trying to take over Sarah. It's trying to use her as a bridge to bring more of its kind through. Stop the investigation. Burn the house. Pray you're not too late. But I couldn't stop. The documentation had become an obsession. Every piece of evidence we collected showed that whatever was happening in that house was getting stronger. And if Father Santos was right about it being a bridge, I had to know what was on the other side. Remember those words carved into the wall? 6 days until the door opens? We'd been counting, and October 21st marked exactly 6 days from when we'd first entered the house. The FBI had taken over the case by then, but they'd requested that I remain as a liaison since I had the most experience with the situation. Agent Rebecca Foster was in charge of the federal investigation, and she was the first law enforcement official I'd met who didn't seem surprised by what we were dealing with. "We have a department," she told me over coffee on the morning of the 6th day. "It's not official, doesn't appear on any organizational charts, but there are cases like this, more than the public knows." "How many more?" "Captain Torres, in the past 5 years, we've documented 47 incidents of what we call anomalous manifestations. The Henderson case is unique because of the level of documentation and the clarity of the phenomenon. Most cases are ambiguous enough that we can classify them as psychological episodes or environmental factors. This one," she paused, stirring her coffee thoughtfully, "this one is going to change how we approach these investigations." Agent Foster's phone rang. After a brief conversation, she hung up and looked at me with an expression that made my stomach drop. "It's starting." We arrived at the Henderson house to find it surrounded by FBI vehicles, news vans, and curious neighbors held back by police barriers. But it was the house itself that made everyone stop and stare. It was changing. The walls were expanding and contracting like the house was breathing. The windows flickered between showing the rooms inside and reflecting something else entirely, a landscape of twisted trees under a starless sky. Sarah stood in the front yard, still in her pajamas despite the cold October air. She was no longer floating, but something was different about the space around her. It bent and warped, like looking at someone through water. "Captain Torres," she called out in that eerily normal 7-year-old voice. "You came back. Mr. Scratch said you would." Agent Foster approached cautiously, one hand on her weapon, though we all knew bullets wouldn't help us here. "Sarah, we need you to come with us. We're going to take you somewhere safe." Sarah tilted her head, and for a moment she looked genuinely confused. "Safe? But Captain Torres, don't you understand? Nowhere is safe anymore. The door is open now. Mr. Scratch's friends are already here." That's when we saw them. Shapes moving between the houses, dark figures that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They moved wrong, like their joints bent in directions that human joints shouldn't bend. "How many?" Agent Foster whispered into her radio. "We count at least 15, ma'am. But they keep multiplying." Sarah laughed, and the sound carried impossibly far in the still air. 15? Oh, Agent Foster, there are so many more than that. They've been waiting so long to visit your world. And now, thanks to me, they finally can. What happened next was captured by 17 different cameras, recorded by 12 different audio devices, and witnessed by over 40 law enforcement officers, federal agents, and civilian bystanders. It became the most documented supernatural event in American history. The house on Maple Street collapsed inward on itself, but instead of falling down, it seemed to fall up, disappearing into a point of absolute darkness that hung in the air where the roof used to be. Sarah rose into the air, but she wasn't alone. Dozens of those dark figures surrounded her, spinning in a slow circle like some kind of otherworldly dance. Captain Torres, her voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once. Do you understand now? This was never about possession. This was about evolution, about your species taking the next step. The darkness spread outward from where the house had been, and everything it touched changed. Streetlights flickered and went out. Car engines died. Electronic devices failed one by one. But it was the people that were the most disturbing. Anyone the darkness touched stopped moving, stopped breathing, but didn't fall down. They just stood there, staring at nothing, with their eyes gone completely black. We need to evacuate, Agent Foster shouted, but her words seemed muffled, like the air itself was becoming thicker. It's too late for that, I replied, watching as the darkness crept closer to our position. Sarah was right. The door is open now. She looked at me with terror in her eyes. What do we do? I pulled out my recorder, the same one I'd been using to document everything for weeks. We bear witness. We record what we can, and we hope someone learns from our mistakes. This is where my story should end. With the darkness consuming everything, with Sarah and her otherworldly companions spreading their influence across our world, with the Henderson case becoming the first documented instance of whatever this was. But that's not what happened. I woke up in my patrol car, parked outside the Henderson house, with Martinez shaking my shoulder. Cap, you okay? You've been sitting here for 20 minutes. The house looked normal. 2-story colonial, white picket fence, garden gnomes on the front lawn, light in every window. I could see the Henderson family through their kitchen window, having dinner like nothing had ever happened. The call, I stammered. The domestic disturbance call. Martinez looked confused. What call? We're here for the Henderson wellness check, remember? David Henderson missed 3 days of work and his employer asked us to make sure everything was okay. I checked my recorder. Empty. No audio files. My camera showed no photos of impossible phenomena. The weeks of documentation, the FBI involvement, Agent Foster, Dr. Kane, Father Santos, none of it existed in any official record. But I remember every detail, every word Mr. Scratch spoke to me in that basement that shouldn't exist, every photograph that showed Sarah defying physics, every night I spent documenting the impossible. David Henderson answered the door, looking perfectly healthy and happy. Officers, is everything all right? Just checking on you, sir. Your employer was concerned when you didn't show up for work. He laughed. Work? But it's Saturday. I never work Saturdays. That's family time. I looked at my watch. Saturday, October 15th. The same date as our first call to the house. That was 3 years ago. I retired 6 months later citing health concerns. Couldn't explain to my superiors that the health concern was my sanity. Martinez doesn't remember any of it. No one does. According to all official records, the Henderson case never happened. The family lives normally. Sarah goes to school, plays with friends, does all the things 7-year-olds do. But sometimes, when I drive past their house, I see her in the yard. And she waves at me. And for just a moment her eyes look completely black. I've spent 3 years trying to understand what happened. Research into parallel dimensions, alternate timelines, mass hallucinations. None of it explains the level of detail I remember. None of it explains why I still have dreams about Mr. Scratch's tea party. The only theory that makes sense is the most terrifying one. What if it did happen? What if the door did open, and those things did come through? What if they succeeded in whatever they were trying to do? And what if erasing our memories of it was part of the plan? I keep looking for signs. Newspaper articles about unexplained phenomena. Missing persons reports that don't quite add up. People who seem different, wrong somehow, like they're wearing faces that don't quite fit. And I keep finding them. The Henderson case was never solved because it was never supposed to be solved. It was supposed to be forgotten. We were supposed to forget. But I remember. And if you're listening to this, if you believe any part of what I've told you, then maybe you'll remember too. Because I have a terrible suspicion that forgetting is exactly what they want us to do. Someone's at my door. It's 3 a.m., and someone's knocking on my door with the same rhythm Sarah used when she was floating in that hallway. Knock, 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 knock. I can see her silhouette through the frosted glass. Same height as a 7-year-old. Same pigtails. She's saying something, but I can't quite make out the words. It sounds like, "Time for tea, Captain Torres. Mr. Scratch has been waiting. The recorder I'm using to tell you this story is about to run out of battery, and I don't think I'm going to have a chance to charge it. If you never hear from the Obscuralore vault again, you'll know why. But remember what I told you. Remember the Henderson case. Remember that some doors, once opened, can never be closed. And if you ever find yourself investigating a case that makes no sense, that defies every rational explanation, run. Don't try to document it. Don't try to understand it. Don't try to help. Just run and hope they let you forget." The knocking's stopped. She's inside now. I can hear her calling my name. If you enjoyed this descent into documented horror, make sure to subscribe to the Obscuralore Vault for more cases that authorities don't want you to know about. Hit that like button if this story kept you on the edge of your seat, and share it with someone who thinks they can handle the truth. But be warned, once you start looking for the cracks in reality, you might not like what you find looking back.